and it's a pleasure to continue the series here at the Charité in its third year now. So the healing arts emerged from a simple but increasingly urgent observation that some of the most relevant questions around health, around illness and care and healing can no longer be meaningfully explored from within a single discipline alone. So over the past 3 years, this series has created a space for conversations between artists, doctors, scientists, researchers, and practitioners, not to blur disciplines, but to let them sharpen one another, ranging from cinema and psychiatry to palliative care, developmental health, observation, trauma, and experimental forms of knowledge. Tonight's session sits beautifully at that intersection, because what happens when neuroscience, immunology, microbiome research, speculative design, sensory perception, and food culture enter the same conversation, which admittedly is not the most conventional constellation for a medical lecture series, nor for art lecture series. But perhaps precisely for that reason, a very good one. We are asking what becomes, epistemologically speaking, visible when different forms of inquiry meet, when medicine meets embodied cultural practice. Our two guests approach these questions from very different directions, but with surprising overlap. Dr. Chotima Böttcher is a research group leader in experimental neurology and clinical neuroimmunology here at Charité's Experimental and Clinical Research Center. Her work focuses on the transition from health to disease, investigating how neuroinflammation is shaped by systemic factors such as lifestyle, nutrition, metabolism, immune responses, and the microbiome. Her research combines cutting-edge biomarker science, multi-omics, neuroimaging, and machine learning to better understand complex neuropsychiatric and neuroinflammatory conditions. If tonight has a strong biomedical anchor, Chotima represents it brilliantly. Maciej Chmara approaches a similar question, or similar questions, from an entirely different epistemic culture. He's a designer, a researcher, an educator, and co-founder of the conceptual design studio Chmara. Maciej and I have actually worked side by side for a couple of years at the Berlin University of the Arts, and I'm very pleased to have both of you here today. His work moves between speculative design, neuroscience, embodied cognition, and culinary culture. In projects such as neurocooking, he explores cooking not simply as nourishment, but as an embodied sensory practice, one that may influence attention, emotional states, and well-being. What I find particularly compelling about tonight's pairing is this. Both guests challenge rigid separations between biology and culture, body and environment, scientific knowledge and embodied experience, and that they may be far less separate than our institutional categories suggest. One works with biomarkers, the other with bread, which I think is exactly why this conversation will be interesting. So thank you all for being here, students, colleagues, curious minds from across all disciplines in the room and online. And as always, before we begin with the 2 short inputs by our speakers, I would like to ask Professor Dr. Anne Berghöfer on stage to also welcome our audience, but also say a few of the more organizational, logistical questions for the participating students.
Yeah, thank you, Lucas. And also from my side, a warm welcome to everybody here and remote. I just want to explain I'm responsible for the credit system for the ECTS accrediting here for you as students or as doctoral students. And the rules are that way that you have to attend all lectures in person or remote. This doesn't play a role. And afterwards, write a short reflection on the session, the lecture here and the discussion of at least 1 page. And after the whole series has been completed, I would ask you to write some kind of discussion reflection, not simply a summary of comprising the whole lecture series. So a final document of at least 2 pages. And you send it to me, to my email address, Anne Berghöfer. You will find it on the internet page. And afterwards, I send you the certification. That's a simple rule. And I think this will be quite helpful for you. So we continue with our 2 speakers.
Thank you, Anne. And then Chotima, you would be the first to come on the stage. So very warm welcome to Chotima Böttcher, please.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So we have to arrange first my talk. Okay. So my title, this takes me some days until I come up with this, The Art of Balance. And this is what we are studying or try to find out where the balance is. And this is all about the challenge to maintaining brain health. And that's what we want to study. So Lucas asked me to give a brief, and this look not that brief, but at least the overall of who I am. And as you see, my here the background is quite confusing or interdisciplinary. You can't interpret both sides. So I start be trained by as a pharmacist and come up with a group leader in Charité, which studied the complexity of neuroinflammation. And this you can see as my life actually driven by passion in science and chemistry especially. And everything is chemistry, you can believe me. And this is a nice people who believe in my concept and like to work with me, I believe so. And of course, you will see during my talk that what we are doing is very complex, very comprehensive. And this is possible only when you have quite good collaboration. So these are the list of people here in Berlin who support us and our study, and also outside Berlin. And of course, the funding agency. So no money, no science, that everyone know it. So I start with this slides, the neuroinflammation. So you all know that gut and brain can communicate to each other. And the known pathway is the vagus nerve pathway, which mainly send the signal from or information from gut to the brain, but very little from brain to the gut. But what we are interested in is another option. How these different compartments communicate to each other. So not only brain and gut, but also blood and cerebrospinal fluid, which can mirror what happened in the brain. And the option we are interested in is, for example, all these chemical compounds represent metabolites that could be produced by the gut. And this can be migrate or travel between compartments and give the signal that responds to whatever insult you have in the body, and also the immune system. This is immune cells that I don't know whether you know that 70% of all immune cells in the body, you can find it in the gut. And that's also the location which immune response could start, initiate, and travel and bring all this information between the compartment and the protein, of course, that can be produced in the gut or in the brain, and again, travel between the compartment. So we want to understand all these options, how things connect to each other, how the compartment can talk to each other. And of course, it's not only what happened in the body, which we call internal exposome. Outside the body, external exposome, like climate, environmental factors, food that you take, or smoke, if you drink alcohol, this all affect what happened in the body. So it's never just one thing that affects your body or your health. And of course, all this can be communicated during disease or during health every day. Can be communication between microbiota. So this is bacteria which live in your gut. It can produce substance and bring it to the brain or vice versa. And this maintain the balance of your health. So it could be that one day, whatever, you get infection, you have imbalance of all this bacteria, the good one and the bad one, and this produce toxic molecule and hormones, whatever, and then it shifts your health from healthy to disease. And this is something we want to understand, what kind of combination could keep us healthy. And of course, if the balance breaks down, then you have trouble, mental health problem, cardiovascular problem, or kidney problem, whatever. And this could then lead to the vicious cycle. For example, if you're depressed, you would never eat carrots, but you go for chocolate or meat, a big steak. So if I have bad day, I go to steak rather than salad, is of course, right? And then it can also affect your metabolism. And again, this bring all molecule in your body into imbalance situation and bring the whole thing even worse. And this is what happened in the body. In the brain, it's the same thing. You have transmitter balance triangle. So this is just example. The system is much more complicated. You have serotonin in the brain that responsible or regulate maintenance, stability of your mental health. And you have dopamine that's more like a driver, to bring you to the goal. And then you have oxytocin, the love neurotransmitter. If you have that, you are more, socialized and you have more friends or whatever. And this, all three neurotransmitter can be regulated via gut microbiota. And this, for example, this is just like one pathway that gut microbiota can regulate the availability of serotonin and dopamine. And this help the brain to produce and release this important neurotransmitter. So, and this oxytocin, for example, has been shown that it can can be direct stimulated by gut microbiota, like lactobacillus species. And this is also like one point to show that it's not only what happened in the brain is matter, but what happened in the gut also can bring the whole thing into balance or imbalance in your health situation. And not only cellular or molecular factors matter, sometimes activity you do is also could regulate your neurotransmitter or your mental health. For example, cooking. I put cooking in the highlights because cooking, but in different purpose, can also induce different neurotransmitter. You will heard more about this in a bit. But for example, if you cook, with mindfulness, you induce serotonin. But you cook the new recipe very challenged, then you drive by dopamine. But if you cook with friends, with family, then you induce oxytocin. So this is how things, connect together. And most of this thing already known, but also a lot of things we don't really understand yet. And even though we are the same person, same body, same genetic, but different age. You are in different condition, So actually I was very happy shy. So this is like Mona Lisa, you have to look long enough, then you realize that I actually smile. So, different age, you change behavior, you change eating behavior. I hate tomato as a child, but now I love it. You have a lot of friends, you play with the whole village. And then you get to be scientist at Charité, then that is you, and you don't have much friend anymore, but more coffee and alcohol in the free time and hamburger. But then you establish in Charité, you very grateful for Charité at some point, and then you become again a happy scientist in a Charité. You have a very good group like me, but then you are old, hormone change, metabolite change, microbiome change, then you cannot, I cannot drink alcohol that much anymore. And then I know how important friends are now, so I get back to them. So this is, it's not just one thing matter in your health, and it's also not one thing that can transfer your health to the disease situation. I think I have to be fast. So you can control many factors. We call it actionable features. And that's what we really want to identify. We really want to know how things connect to each other and how we could control all this balance. This is our task. I just want to give you like two projects we have right now. So one is about patient. We have a patient cohort, and in this, as you see here, we analyze peripheral compartment, and we also analyze brain compartment if it's possible. And we want to know, as I told you already, how this cellular, molecular features connect to each other, and to identify the factor that could help us to regulate or control a health situation of patient. And we have one EU-funded project which we want to understand the health to disease transition that lead to change in metabolic, in kidney, in heart, cardiovascular, and also brain disease. We, like I said, we identify or characterize all microbiome, what change, and metabolome, immune cells, that what I already mentioned before, to see all this connection, the communication, what different in different compartment, and how we could control that. And this, it's very complicated. It's a long time to establish all this. And what I could say at the last slide is the whole thing. The art of balance in your life is matter, be kind, know yourself, find your balance, and don't give up.
Thank you much, Chotima. This was amazing, mind-blowing information for me. Maciej, your turn now. And the stage is yours. Thank you for being here.
Hi, my name is Maciej. I'm a hobbyist baker, maker, designer, architect, and founder of the interdisciplinary research group MIAM at the Junge Akademie Leopoldina National Academy of Sciences. It's very interesting to hear from Chotima about the idea of balance, an idea that also defined a big part actually of my studies and my later research. When I thought about it, I trained across product design and architecture. And one of the first things I wrote about was actually on non-visual perception of space, as I believed that there was a strong imbalance of the sensual perception of space. And this was about 15 years ago when social media, art, and blogs were rising, and life was tilting hard toward the visual and to the digital. I had back then an inspiring professor on the acoustics of space and of architecture, and digging deeper into this sense and how we orient in space for acoustics also opened my interest in the other senses like touch, smell, taste, including the retronasal channel as elementary part of orientation and aesthetic spatial experience. Here you see, for example, Klangraum in Vorarlberg, one of the first projects I realized that was architectural installation that was focusing on silence and that we made together with physicists of acoustics. I built acoustic installations focusing on silence and worked extensively with food culture and food spaces in form of mobile kitchens or like architectural spaces without walls. That's also in Vorarlberg, actually in Werkraum. And I showed these pictures not saying much to the project, but it shows very much like kind of sensual and tactile approach to the projects we were doing in these years. So, and when I talk about kitchens, so there was one of the first projects, a kind of mobile kitchen called Mobile Hospitality. And for nearly 2 years, I always say we because it's Anna Rosinka and me, traveled together through Europe and parts of the US, inviting strangers to cook and dine with us and constantly building new kitchens and experimenting with this medium. We've realized a social cooking school after a while, supper clubs, and even dinners with several Michelin-starred chefs. This interest in multisensory perception, like the interplay of all senses and food, culminated during COVID when I held a guest professorship for speculative gastronomy at the Academy of Fine Arts in Wrocław. As I couldn't meet the students in person, we were cooking and designing together over Zoom, exploring the emotional dimensions of dining together while physically separated, but still sharing the same sensual and aesthetic experience. I learned back then a lot about how strong senses can influence our emotions and how difficult it actually is to explain to someone with words, for example, how to properly chop or how to move your hand when stretching sourdough. 2021, I started a cooperation with Charles Spence from the Department of Experimental Psychology at the University of Oxford. And we began with a simple question: why the heck was everybody suddenly baking bread? We talked very much about multimodal perception and approached it through sensory disharmony, mental health, and rising adjacent phenomena like ASMR. And in parallel, I had also another life, still being like architect and designer, where I tried actually to implement like acoustics, tactile experience, and other things into real spaces. But back to my artistic research. So here is how the project Living a Good Life with Bread started with Charles Spence. We actually did the first peer-reviewed studies on the therapeutic potential and multisensory perception of bread dough, what is kind of a funny niche, but we were very happy to do this and set new grounds and make people laugh about it. We studied kind of in these studies, in these workshops, we studied each sense separately, combined. We did research the influence of different recordings of the Symphony of Crust of Bread, and I will not go into detail, but you find these papers online if you are interested. So until then I was working with food, but then suddenly bread brought it to another layer, and the whole situation of this paperwork, of these papers that just should have taken 3 or 4 months kind of escalated. And in 2023, we represented Austria at the London Design Biennale with an installation on multisensory experience of bread. We did different tools. We created a speculative world on bread. We designed bread players, tools for listening to breadcrumbs, to smelling. We did microbial sculptures of the ferment microorganisms, and so on and so on. I will not go into too deep into it because we don't have time, but just showing you a bit how all this happened. And here is something very interesting for me. I talked to Rob Dunn and Madden during this time, and they did a study where they found out how much influence actually by your hand is in the fermentation process of the sourdough. And more interesting, they found out that actually the microbes in the sourdough will also have an influence on your skin's microbiome when you are baking regularly. So I thought that's like amazing, so incredible. Like by baking, you get something like a sourdough cyborg suddenly. Yes, you can make biohacking or different funny experiments with ferment foods. So what I did was also pretty soon that was like my sourdough cyborg mask, and pretty soon I got into a laboratory and got my microbiome also genetically sequenced, and had this super much information coming, like, as I said, from design, architecture, and art, not knowing what to do with it, actually. So I thought, I'm working like with sensuality. What shall I do with these things? And I started like, to make 3D models, more drawings of these microorganisms, tried to visualize them, try to touch them, try to feel them, and try to kind of get a connection from what I do with the dough itself, also getting like these not, for me, visible microorganisms into the real world. And one figure was very important for me back then, was the biologist Lynn Margulis, who created the concept and the term of the holobiont, defining us humans as the symbiont with microorganisms, as we carry more microbial cells than human cells in us. And without these microorganisms in our body and our mind would not work. Yes, we could not see, nothing would happen. So it's very interesting that all of this is defining us. Yes, and as we heard from in the last talk from Chotima, that also different lactic acid bacteria and so on can also influence our well-being. So I continued to work on this. Parallelly, I worked still in with multisensory experience. I kind of looked what happened in psychology, and I continued after this going a bit more techy, what was new grounds for me, and I talked to neuroengineers, neuroscientists, and different engineers, as I was really interested what is going on in my brain. And perhaps some of you know the Pixar movie Ratatouille, you know, the little rat that is controlling Linguini, the trash guy, and how he can actually cook. And I thought, oh my God, this would be amazing if I could build a wearable that actually is like this little rat controlling me. But I wanted to do something a bit different. So I thought, I want that actually I understand what is happening in my brain. And I want kind of have the response like a guiding hand. So I designed a wearable on my hand with vibrotactile feedback that actually again responded to my brain. And I kind of created the first feedback loop between like me, brain, haptics, and dough. And we did repeat then the Oxford study that we did without any technological tools with EEG, EMG, EKG, movement, acceleration, and so on, and build this wearable to see what happens in our brain. I will not go into it so much because it's probably bores you. But we kind of designed and encoded an emotional model where we could see if you are happy or if you are feeling stressed or whatever while working with dough and what response you should give. And I thought that's interesting, but what was still missing was the microorganisms that I was so interested in. And then I went into the next step and I thought, okay, I know how they look. I built this sculpture, but still I cannot interact really with them. I don't understand them. And then the same I did for human brain. I built actually from for microorganisms, and I measured the microvoltage that they are developing while fermentation process, the changes in temperature and other parameters. So I could export from them a MIDI file and put them into synthesizers and make the microorganisms make music. So currently I'm investigating actually how to combine all of these tools and whether the hearing of the sound of the microorganisms shifts my emotional state compared to other sounds, or whether this translates into vibrotactile feedback that opens a different mode of interaction with them, and whether such interaction in turn influences their well-being, like the well-being of the microorganisms, building on existing studies on the influence of sound and fermentation. And I'm finishing here, and you will just hear for a few seconds how actually my sourdough can make music.
So the sound of sourdough. It's a lot of first informations tonight. Chotima, maybe you can also come down. And I'm thinking right now whether we do it maybe standing. Do we have a second mic, or are we dealing with one? Okay, so we'll share a mic, and you have to tell us where to stand so that our online audience sees us properly. Maybe we all come. Yeah, this looks good. So thank you. There was a lot of information that I was totally new to and very inspired by. But maybe we start more on a personal level before we go into the subject matter. And we met once before. We've known each other for many years now, but in a previous call. I'm personally now curious, how did you get into these subjects? Like, what drove you personally, passion into the subjects that you're now dealing with and where we see all these overlaps? And attached question, today, in our previous conversations, what is the thing that you learned from the other? What's the one curious thing that you're taking with you?
Okay.
You want to start?
Yeah. So, like I told you, my life is more or less driven by passions in science. My family also know that. And one person who triggered my interest in science, my grandpa. So he is practiced as a traditional Chinese medicine. And he always told me, like, don't look at one point. You have to look the whole picture. And this, I always keep it in mind. And I start doing science because I'm crazy about chemistry. So I study pharmacy instead of medicine. And then I start getting to know more and more in science. And at some point, I decided to jump into human system. So I already did plant system, animal system, and then I jumped to human system. And I recalled what my grandpa always says: don't look at one point, look the whole system. And that's also why I get to establish the whole network, which I already showed you in my talk, because you cannot do all this alone. You cannot do this complex research alone. And I get to know, fortunately, in Charité, many people who expert in microbiome, expert in metabolism, and it's very fascinating, how people do in their own area. And I have, like I show, many different technology during my training. And this also keep me, always to think more outside my comfort zone and try to connect everything together. So I don't understand in each of technology some of this, but I know the whole picture. And that it's really challenge myself and also increase every day my interest. And I always have a question in my mind. Now I'm talk too much, but what I want to say is maybe I born to be a scientist. I cannot dance, I cannot sing, cannot paint. So I always interested in this and want to know more and more and more. So this is maybe the thing. And that's also good to know Maciej. I'm always say wrong. So anyways, Maciej, right. And now it's opened my mind to another, open my eyes, to another area. And I also watched your video, you sent me the link. And this is also fit to what I believe about the hands. Like, I think if you write thing with hands, then you can connect your thought much better than you type or using your mobile phone. And it makes sense that you use, this baking, working with dough, use your hand, feel what you touch. And this, I believe, is also activate your immune system, activate your metabolites and microbiome function. And this is also sort of meditation. Yeah, I think I also learned a lot with that. And that's what I always believe. You have to open your mind, know the new things and learn from others. And this will make like a puzzle, putting into what you understand about the nature. And that's what arts and science can merge, because we both try to communicate what from the nature to what we understand. I think that would fit to healing arts.
Yeah, what drove me there? I mean, as I said, I'm trained as a product designer and architect, and also I'm running a kind, let's say, conservative design and architecture studio parallelly, and still love designing stuff. But I believe that architecture or design is rather a method or a medium to have an approach to different things. And often, to many questions, I ask myself, designing a new chair is just not the real answer, you know, and being like educated with professors that kind of are in the modernist Bauhaus heritage, I was always asking myself, how can I make the life of other people more beautiful? How can I make it more healthy and more functional? And I believe that with this interdisciplinary artistic research that I do, and with the help of psychologists, neuroscientists, I perhaps have better tools in my hand to do this. And one of my architectural professors also told me that architects don't know anything but 10% of everything. And I mean, that fits a bit with what you're saying, this overall view. And so I'm working also like this, you know, that I just like, I see something like, you know, I talk to a neuro engineer and I get like super fascinated, and I grab a pile of books and I go on the nerves of different scientists and so on. I download some stuff. I print like days and nights with the 3D printers and just like prototype things, you know, until it works. And then I continue and I cooperate with many different scientists. I just have fun to exploring these things in depth. And yeah, what I learned also with Chotima, and that's like a topic that perhaps will be the next topic. It's like the chemistry, as I'm like really into microbiology and also the vagus nerve. But I was very bad in chemistry, and I hated chemistry in school, I have to admit. But yeah, it's just like a super interesting thing, and also like your approach of overview and balance is very interesting, as I kind of get like always to different points, you know, and rather go in them as like an extreme point, you know, like saying we all need to do now sourdough bread and we need to touch it like this and so on, you know. But it's always, I think, also in arts, so you always want to show like extreme points and make a point. And this kind of balance and finding the balance also in the overview is very interesting.
Thank you for the personal entrees. Then I would like to, and again, I'll ask a few questions, and then it's really also on you to engage with the conversation. That's kind of the core of the Healing Arts series always. But health, I mean, it's obviously a topic here, the healing arts. Because in both of your works, health seems to emerge the relationships. No, between immune systems, environment, food, microbes, sensory experience, behavior. So it's not, it appeared at least in both of you, not as a stable thing, but more in an ongoing negotiation with cultural, sensory, ecological factors in it. So how do you, what's your like working definition for health from your perspective?
Yeah. So you mean like what I think, what the meaning of health? Yeah. Or then I want to go back to I'm sorry. Yeah. So I think health is more like balance. That's what I always believe. So also for myself, you know, and also like a personalized condition, because health, you know, if you talk about healthy people, then the health definition of this person will be different from diabetes person who well treated and he feel healthy, you know, but his expectation will not be the same like healthy people. So I think health, it's personalized things, that what you think. Like if someone come to you and asks you, how's you feeling? how are you today? And you said, I'm fine. It doesn't mean that you're fine, but you fine for this situation. I think health for me is more like balance, how you feel. And also health is not only the body condition, but also like mental condition, and also your interaction with other people. There's also health. If you very healthy, but antisocial, I don't think you have a good health, you know, like it's a combination, a balance, and it's a personal thing, how you identify or define this, you know. Yeah, I think that would be my answer.
I mean, it's a very difficult question. I believe very much, I mean, I don't want to talk about like the classical clinical definition of health, but for me, it's also a combination of different aspects and of practices or techniques we're doing, and also in this sense, like of a balance of like mental load and physical load. You know, I believe that we have, especially in our society, very strong central imbalance because of digitization. You know, so many people, children only swiping over screens. There is very little tactile input. That is also why there is this kind of hype of DAO and other, let's say, tactile practices. We are in a certain essential imbalance, and also the same is happening with it before with about microbiota. Yes, in different countries in Western societies, we have a very, let's say, poor diet on fiber and on ferment products that also, let's say, generate a kind of imbalance of our microbiome. But for me personally, health is just like really how I am feeling. You know, I need to eat well. I think a day when I eat bad is just like a lost day, because I think you eat like 3 times a day or 2 or twice a day, and it's just like worth it to eat good and have fun with it and enjoy it, and to move and to read and so on, and to do all these things that bring you a little further. But I also believe that that's why I'm also interested like in microorganisms, you know, that define so much of our mental state and our physical state, that it is something that, as you said in your talk, is changing over the life. So health is nothing that is there and stays, or that we can keep on a certain level, but we can also develop it in a more positive way. Also, older people can have a stronger, better health if they work on it. So for me, health is like always something not in the sense of perfecting your health, but something you need to really actively care every day in the form of the smallest things, like, you know, not being paranoid about everything you do, but just like having a holistic approach to it.
Thank you. And another, you just mentioned the microbiome. Another common denominator between the two of you is that maybe let's call it the invisible body, because much of what shapes now our physical and mental well-being, we learned, is invisible. Immune activity, inflammation, microbial ecologies, neurochemical processes, but also emotional and sensory regulation. So how do we become aware of forces we cannot directly perceive? That's what I'm curious to hear about. And then I was thinking, you mentioned Lynn Margulis earlier, an author known also for the book The Symbiotic Planet, the idea of symbiosis as one of the evolutionary forces. And I thought of Donna Haraway, who said something like, to be one, you have to be many. No? That kind of, to understand us not only as individuals, but actually more as our status as assemblies of sorts, no? Also, almost like micro-species assemblies. So back to the question, how do we become aware of these invisible forces that we cannot directly perceive? And how are you dealing with that?
Okay, so maybe I will tell you about my experience, so my personal health. So in my family, we have genetic, how can I say, like a genetic driven diabetes. So all my brothers, sister, we all have diabetes. And before that, I didn't, also before the diagnosis, I didn't aware of anything, you know. You watch the television and people said, yeah, eat vegetable, it's fine. Eat that and do sport, everything fine. And then I'm very good in sport, but only badminton. The rest I'm very bad. So, but I do sport very regularly. I eat healthy, but then I diagnosed as a diabetes person. And then it's the first time that I think, well, there must be something wrong that I don't know, that I, you know, because I didn't aware of these things. And then I use myself as a experiment rabbit, I would say. So I test everything, you know, and now you see from my slides, my idea concept of research. And I told you, know yourself is the best. Forget all this probiotics advertisement, do sport 300 hours a week. This is all the average thing that people claim it help you, but yourself, you know it better. You should test it yourself, and I do it myself. You know, I start back to running again, and I could run the first day 1 kilometer, and it took me 30 minutes, and I was like, what? I never know this before, and I keep testing. You know, how should I improve all these things, you know, health condition. And because I'm now in research, I know all about this microbiome, metabolites, and all things, but you all don't need to know all this stuff, but you can test with yourself every day. If I eat this, how can I feel? I mean, if you're healthy, nothing will affect you much in your health. But if you know that you have problem, you know, everyone has, you know, you have allergy and so on. And you know from my talk that it's everything is matter, weather and everything. Again, I say, know yourself. You have to, you know, study yourself. This is the only way you can do it, and you can know all this invisible condition. You don't know how many microbiomes or how many microbiotas you have in the gut, but you know how I feel when I do this and that. And that I tell you from my experience, find your balance. Don't listen to anyone, listen to yourself. And this is the only way you can stay healthy. Also, this I tell also, I'm talking about also social activity. I mean, my husband is here. He's an oxytocin person, so he loves to meet friends and family, but I hate it sometimes. I'm a serotonin introvert person, so leave me alone. Don't invite me to any party sometime. So you know yourself better, and only you can study and understand yourself. Sorry, I talk again too much. Find your balance.
Yeah, I don't have this testing approach myself. As I said, I got my microbiome genetically sequenced and just like didn't know what to do much about it. But yeah, I can tell you, I have a kind of microbial zoo at home, you know, with shelves full of sourdough starters, kombuchas, ginger beers, grapefruit starters, and what else, slime molds, and and a bokashi composting anaerobe fermentation. So I'm kind of trying to have an understanding, like besides making music, for example, with these microorganisms, kind of having them around me, you know, feeding them, using them, kind of try to listen to the body, which of them I want to eat now, you know, or smell now, and so on. And often my body tells me, oh, I'm living like, I'm lying in the bathtub and I want to have like this ferment exactly because I want to drink this or eat exactly this. And I feel that my body needs it. And so it's a bit similar approach. And I would not say that it's like so much only awareness for it, as you mentioned, like Julius Haraway, and what I find in this context very interesting is Lisa Heldke, the feminist philosopher, who is also talking very much about embodiment and about embodied knowledge. And she also is actually criticizing the hierarchy of classical research very much, that we need to work much more, not with our brain and making papers that are peer-reviewed, but working much more with our body. And there is so much that we cannot explain in a paper, and we should just accept it and kind of put the embodied knowledge and what our hands can do, what our body can do on the same level as theory is. And that is still a long way to kind of destroy this hierarchy. And probably often it's okay to not explain everything, to think about everything, but just like do try out, experiment, and kind of communicate with these things in your personal way.
Very good point. I mean, I have many more questions, but maybe I can open up now and walk around and see if one of you dares to join the question. Maybe a question for you. Yeah. So Stan here, Stan Valdez.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for all your sharing all your knowledge. It's super interesting for me because I come from the Culinary Arts University in Spain. I study molecular cuisine actually, and it's interesting because now I'm in my path of multidisciplinary arts and different techniques and approaches. And yeah, I'm happy to be here, and thank you so much. My question is, have you exposed yourself to enough time, like just for yourself, enough time to cooking for other persons? Have you exposed yourself cooking for others? I mean, I don't know if you know the answers, like you're just cooking, preparing food, making food, etc. Because you both have contact with food, and like you just mentioned that you're changing now your habits, and now less alcohol, less this, but more of this and that and that. But I'm a chef, so cooking from for another person, or for publics, or for mass people is like super interesting for me. Also, like how it affects your brain, how it affects like the exposure of like long shifts into the kitchens and everything, plus the studies and the research that we have to do for create a new menu to take care of the allergies of people and stuff like that. So I just wanted to, it's a personal question, so thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll take the mic down again. With one mic, I'm going to be busy here.
Yeah, actually I did, because I was, I told you like at the beginning we had this mobile hospitality project, and besides that, I was designing quite much for different chefs, and so I got befriended with chefs and also and learned quite much from them. But I'm also hosting a supper club where I cook like for 30-40 people, 8 courses and things like this, and I'm cooking at home all the time. I'm baking minimum every second day bread, if not more often, so I'm spending sometimes more time in the kitchen than I do at work. But yeah, I really enjoy cooking, and I believe very much that cooking as a cultural technique, as an aesthetic practice, is also extremely beneficial for your mind, especially also for the development of children. So I have 2 kids, and I try to spend with them much time in the kitchen. It's very interesting for fine motorics, for sensual development. But there is very little research on this topic. So actually, the 2 papers we did like on working with dough were like really the first peer-reviewed papers that concentrated on the multisensory experience while cooking. There is much to be done, but very little interest like in financing studies like this. I will be next week again in Oxford in a culinary lab, and hope that we will get some money for the next studies in this segment.
So if I could add, I think in one of my slides, you can see that different condition of cooking, it's drive different pathway, right? Imagine you cook for 50 people, that stress, right? So it's not just something you just do it, right? And it's need a lot of frontal cortex also, because you need to plan things, you know, and this it's not something always positive, I would say, but if you cook your own, I think cooking, I love cooking. Cooking is more like meditation, and cooking also science. So my daughter always complained that my food look different every time because I'm a scientist. So I like to change my recipe every time. So, and this for me, it's meditation, it's mindfulness sort of things. And if you cook new recipe, like I said in my talk, this is challenge, right? And it's exciting a bit, whether it would be good or bad, and cooking with friends, you know, with many friends, is also induce your social interaction, oxytocin drive, and this. I mean, in general, cooking, I would say, something you do with your hand. You feel it. It's always good for the whole system, not only mental health, but cooking for many people. I grown up in restaurant. I know my parents is not always happy. Yes.
Actually, very nice turn, Anna. I come to you in a second to kind of rethink cooking as a practice of care. And because in a way, if you think about it, or I was just thinking, food kind of sits very interestingly between biology and culture, between, I don't know, chemistry and ritual, between necessity and pleasure. No, so I'm very inspired by this thought.
One sentence to it. I also thought that cooking is very similar to design, you know, because you buy the stuff in a shop the same like you buy materials, you change them a bit, like you sand them, you chop them, you do whatever with them, and then you combine them to something completely new, you know, and you combine colors, smells, and so on. So I think that's like also something. I met many designers who really love cooking, because I think that's like really a strong parallel to creative processes.
Cooking is chemical reaction. Cooking is chemical reactions. Yes.
And cooking is, now we go into something interesting. What I am also just realizing, but maybe this is open thinking, cooking is also deeply and almost solitary human, because no other species cook.
Yeah, that's the anthropological theory by Richard Wrangham, who defined human as cooking apes. Here's also the cooking ape hypothesis.
Fantastic. Another thing learned. Anne, you had a question? Anne Berghöfer.
So, thank you. I'm still really impressed by both your talks, and probably I will thinking about these talks until Sunday evening. I have to do until Sunday evening with it. But I wonder, Maciej, you talked about, or you started the idea that touching the bread while baking means that there is also some kind of microbiome going over into the body. So it's not only the therapeutic effect of touching something, yeah, but also really a microbiotic. Do you think that this is also, this could be of therapeutic use simply in psychiatry or in treating patients, that we work on bread with them. Is it so specific, or is it simply that we touch something? Because in psychiatry, our culture is very touchless. It's speech oriented and touchless. But I'm still thinking about this. Is it specific or not? What do you think?
Thank you, Anna.
I mean, honestly, that's like my dream, that we can like biohack in a positive way our skin's microbiome. But there is very, very little research on it. There's just like, probably, you know, like last year we published, I think, 2 papers on the skin's microbiome on mental health. And I talked to a skin specialist. He's called Dr. Kellerwert. Perhaps you know him. He's in Belgium, and he did the first microbial treatment for people that really smell. So like to actively change the microbiome to another odor, and so having also mental benefits, not only socially, but also by changing it. And actually, I think the same microorganisms that are responsible for acne in the face are, when they are on our body, actually positive for our mental health, for making us happier. But when they get into our face, they make us, by social reasons, not so happy anymore. And I cannot answer you this question because there's no real research on the one hand, and on the other hand, it's super complex, because when you think of a sourdough, yes, then a sourdough is always a new symbiosis of wild yeasts, lactic acid bacteria, and acetic acid bacteria. When you think that there is more than 1,300 wild yeasts, and only now flying around us more than 70, around 1,500 kinds of acetic acid bacteria and 4,500 kinds of lactic acid bacteria that can combine in each sourdough in each way. So probably there are some beneficial sourdoughs and probably not. In a speculative way, I really hope, and there are also researchers that try to do like microbial clothing and experiment with it to have like mental health benefits from this. And I would really dream of this, and this would be like kind of my overall project, to make a kind of cookbook from the microbial aspects, not only of eating, but from microbial exchange during food preparation. Because it's not only dough, like with pretty every much of food, or like when you're gardening, you know, when you're gardening, digging in the earth, besides the sensual aspect, you're also consuming all the time microorganisms in your skin. It's a super interesting field, but unfortunately, there is still very much research to do. And probably not from people like me, but more from people like you from the Charité. Sorry.
No.
This is getting so interesting. But there's another question.
Yeah, I'm really interested in the gut feeling. And I have the feeling in our society, we are losing the gut feeling and the connection between the gut and the brain. So my question would be, what can we learn from the gut? And to Maciej, the question would be, how do you think we, I'm also a designer, how can we as a designer help to get back to the kind of gut feeling and to more listening to the body, because the gut is something inside, and we as a designer, we create the outside. So yeah, what is your position on that?
Thank you for these 2 questions. Let's start with you, Chotima.
So maybe I would answer like this. So I think the good example is the oxytocin. You know, this is a neurotransmitter in the brain. but it has been shown in animal, and I'm waiting for a human study, that this neurotransmitter can be induced, the production and release of this neurotransmitter can be induced directly by gut microbiota. So this via the vagus nerve pathway. And this has been shown that if you treat the mice, for example, in human, unfortunately there's no data yet. If you treat the mice with specific microbiota, these mice adapt the behavior of social activity. So they tend to have, prefer more social activity, caring of the baby and so on. And if we cut the vagus nerve, all this behavior are gone. So I don't completely understand gut feeling because it's much more than oxytocin, but this is one example that I can give you as a scientific evidence that there is a communication between the gut and the brain. But this will not explain why you have gut feeling of a person, you look at the face and you have gut feeling that this one you cannot trust or something like that. I don't know which bacteria tell you that, but I think there is such a communication, but we don't know exactly, we don't understand that. Yeah, I don't know whether this answer a little bit, maybe your question. Yes.
I mean, with this question, we're actually again at Julius, who was also actually giving the microorganisms their own agency and saying, like in the holobiont theory, as there is more of them than we are, we shouldn't be like this kind of superhuman idea, but also give microorganisms a kind of symbiotic agency that they also decide for us, that they decide what is good for them and so on. So she explained the communication between us and microorganisms in this way. But from a design point of view, I mean, for me, it's very interesting, to think about materials. And I was always thinking, like also when I was doing furniture or very classical design object, I was always thinking about it, like, how is it when I touch this thing? Do I use oil or do I use paint? What is not killing the material in some kind of way, because I liked when I still can smell the wood or something like this, and we know that, for example, pine or spruce wood has an influence on the microbiome of different things. You can use pine or spruce very well in the kitchen and no mold will come on it and so on. But on plastic, you will have when plastic is like a bit destroyed, you will have like plenty of weird things in it. But so I thought, we kind of still live in this heritage of pasteurism, trying to kill everything, but we should kind of accept it and learn to live with it and exchange it, and having it as a designer, perhaps with each design process and material choice in your mind, how we can do that and how we can think about it, and perhaps also work more with living materials. I believe very much that this is the next thing in interior architecture, to have wall materials or something like this that are microbially active.
Thank you. Is there another question? Otherwise, I jump in. Here, any? No. Then maybe, because that was kind of, somehow we touched it a couple of times, and that's maybe also our closing question then, is the different ways of knowing, or the different ways of knowledge. You mentioned now a few times embodied knowledge, how important it is also in your research. And you also just spoke of evidence. So maybe as a final reflection, your thoughts on the idea. That's a topic that, Anna, Vanessa, we had this so many times here that we discussed scientific evidence versus embodied knowledge, in particular in artistic research. Yeah, maybe your reflection on this in juxtaposition or maybe complementary positioning of embodied knowledge and scientific evidence. Who wants to go first?
Yes.
Yeah, I would take it from the other side, because for me, and why I'm also doing much work in the sector of speculative design, I think it's very interesting when you create an artifact, an object, an installation or something like this, and perhaps, like Dan and Raby are creating always like impossible objects. But when we look at people like David Kirby, who were actually like, he was analyzing sci-fi movies where like tablets appeared or food printers and so on. And he said that it was very important that these objects as artifacts appeared in movies and we could think about it. And 20, 30 years later, they get realized. So I believe that it's very important also to design and produce also absurd objects, and things that we can touch. And this is what I mean also with embodied knowledge, not only like to create something, but also like children do, touching an object, understanding it, listening to it, having being influenced by it, and then kind of starting to think if it's like an object that has something to do with ecological aspects. There's this project in the Emirates some years ago, where they had like a smog inhaler. I don't know if you know that. And it was like, I think it's somewhere in the Emirates, it was like a big design exhibition. They had a smog inhaler and they were saying, inhale it, this is how your air will be in 20 years, And all the people inhaling it were coughing and so on. And actually this had really strong influence on the ecological politics. So this is for me also embodied knowledge, what we can do like as practitioners or designers. And I mean, I could talk for ages about the other part of embodied knowledge and visa healthcare and how to learn it and so on. But I think that's also very important to kind of work, for me to work with scientists and kind of try to understand scientific theories and generate with these installations or objects that make people that don't want or are not able perhaps to read a 20 pages peer-reviewed paper that is like super boring, but can see an exhibition, smell something, touch, feel it, taste something, and understand what we want to communicate and what we want to say. This is for me perhaps a bit another aspect that you wanted to know, but this is for me the most important aspect of embodied knowledge, and also the link where I think that scientists and artists and designers should work much more together.
Yeah, it's difficult. Because for me as a scientist, everything starts with a question. So I keep questioning everything, like why this happened, what would happen if I do this and that it starts the whole thing. So we have question, and then we make the question concrete so that we can know the way to answer that question. And it's usual in scientist life, you answer one question, you have 10 other, you have 10 other new questions. And then you start answering the other 10 questions, then you have another 100. And that's why I'm working already many years in science, and I still have questions. And this is how we how we work in science, or at least in my group. I always tell my student, you have question, you define your question, you plan the experiment, you get the result, then you understand the result. Don't expect anything from results. So you learn what the result tells you, and then you will find the next question. And then at the end, you will answer the very first question of you, which is much bigger, like what can keep you, which factor can keep you in a very good health condition. This is too big. Then you have to chop and then do like a step, like I said, question, define question, design your experiment, get the result, learn from it, do another, have another question. But when I got invitation to this event, I tried to find out what is the common between science and art. And I asked ChatGPT, I asked Claude, I asked Notebook LM, all available AI. And they tell me different things. But the common thing, which I also agree to the AI, that art, or maybe first science try to communicate what exactly happened in the nature. And art try to express what happened in the nature. And I think this is, I agree, I personally agree with this AI. And I think if we merge the same, merge science and art, and already like you told, right, we find evidence, but we are the bad person who explain or give back to society because nobody would understand what we're talking. And then we need you to translate and communicate back to the whole population. We try our best to improve our communication skill, but you can see I talk too much with very little meaning. So that would be my answer.
Beautiful. I think we can all take a kind of question by question approach to understanding with us tonight. I think that's an ongoing process for us as well to find the connections between arts and science and arts and medicine. But we recognized over the last couple of years that for sure imagination is one thing that both need, also to just even come up with the first question. Then you mentioned the experimentation is what both the arts and the science hold in common. There's no science without experimentation. There's definitely no art, no design without experimentation. For a good design, it takes around 2,000 takes, and attention to the process of things. And well, this is our current status of common denominators, and we will be exploring more following your question by question approach to understanding. Thank you so much for being here, Chotima and Maciej. It was beautiful, very inspiring, a lot of new information. I hope you enjoyed the evening as well. Thank you so much for being here in the room, as well as our online audience. I'm very... We will... Yeah, maybe there was a question from the audience. We will write this in the chat in just a second. Yeah, but I was about to say thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the beautiful presentations, and thank you for all the wonderful input. And I hope to see you again in 2 weeks. No, next week, actually. Next week on the 20th. Not in this room, in the Paul-Ehrlich Saal. And hope to see there again Professor Dr. Monika Ankele, who is the curator and director of the Medizinisches Museum here at the Charité, and Angela Alves, an artist and also teacher from the Berlin University of the Arts. Thank you very much.
Thank
you. Maciej.